Arriving at the camp was supposed to be a fun escape. The moment I stepped off the bus on May 6, 2024, I felt an eerie chill in the air. The camp was beautiful during the day, nestled in the woods with a serene lake, but something felt off. The counselors gave us a tour, pointing out various cabins, the dining hall, and then the library. The building looked ancient, with ivy creeping up its stone walls and windows that seemed perpetually shrouded in shadows. The camp director, Mr. Thompson, gathered us around the library entrance. "There is one rule here you must follow," he said sternly. "Never enter the library at night, especially after the signal bell rings." His words hung heavy in the air, stirring my curiosity. Why such a strict rule? What was inside that made it so dangerous after dark? Later that evening, as I unpacked in my cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that the library was calling to me. My curiosity was stronger than my fear. Around midnight, the signal bell rang, a low, mournful sound that echoed through the camp. I glanced at my watch and decided to make my move. The others were asleep, but I was wide awake, driven by an inexplicable urge. Sneaking out of the cabin, I made my way towards the library. The night was eerily silent, the only sound being the crunch of leaves under my feet. As I approached the library, I noticed a faint glow coming from the windows. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting me in. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was dark, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the windows. Rows of dusty books lined the shelves, and the air was thick with the scent of aged paper. As I ventured further in, I heard a faint rustling sound. My heart raced, but I pressed on, drawn by an invisible force. Just as I reached the center of the room, a shadow moved across the floor. I froze, straining to see in the dim light. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized I was not alone. The shadow moved swiftly, disappearing behind a tall bookshelf. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stood there, frozen in fear. Gathering my courage, I took a cautious step forward, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The library seemed to close in around me, the silence broken only by the faint sound of my own breathing. As I edged closer to the bookshelf, I heard a soft whisper, like the wind rustling through leaves. The words were indistinguishable, but their eerie tone sent shivers down my spine. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing behind me, but there was no one there. My curiosity was now mingled with a growing sense of dread, but I couldn't turn back. I reached the end of the aisle and peered around the corner. The shadow was gone, but something else caught my eye. An old, leather-bound book lying open on a table. Its pages were filled with strange, intricate symbols that seemed to dance in the flickering candlelight. I felt an overwhelming urge to read it, to uncover its secrets. As I picked up the book, the whispers grew louder, almost as if they were coming from the pages themselves. Suddenly, a hand clamped down on my shoulder. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Jake, one of the counselors. His face was pale, his eyes wide with fear. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, glancing nervously around the room. "You shouldn't be here. It's not safe." Before I could respond, the signal bell rang again, louder this time. The sound seemed to reverberate through the entire building, making the walls tremble. Jake grabbed my arm and pulled me towards the exit. "We have to go now," he urged, his voice filled with urgency. I stumbled after him, clutching the book tightly in my hand. As we reached the door, I glanced back one last time. The library was shrouded in darkness, the whispers fading into silence. Jake slammed the door shut behind us, and we stood there, panting in the cool night air. "Don't ever come back here at night," he warned, his voice trembling. "There are things in there that should never be disturbed." I nodded, still clutching the mysterious book, my mind racing with questions. Back in my cabin, I couldn't sleep. The events of the night replayed in my mind, and the mysterious book lay open on my bed. The symbols on its pages seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight, drawing me in. I knew I shouldn't read it, but the curiosity was too strong. I began to decipher the strange text, each word filling me with a mix of dread and fascination. The book told a story of an old curse placed upon the library by a vengeful spirit. It warned that anyone who entered the library at night would awaken the spirit, doomed to face its wrath. As I read, I felt a cold presence in the room, as if the spirit was watching me. The air grew heavy, and I found it hard to breathe. I closed the book, my heart pounding, but the feeling of being watched lingered. The next day, I couldn't concentrate on any of the camp activities. My thoughts kept drifting back to the library and the book. I needed answers. During lunch, I pulled Jake aside and asked him about the library and the curse. He hesitated, his eyes darting around nervously. "It's not just a story," he finally said. "The curse is real. Decades ago, a librarian was wrongfully accused of a crime and executed. Her spirit haunts the library, seeking revenge on anyone who disturbs her." His words sent chills down my spine, but I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. That night, I waited for the signal bell to ring before sneaking out again. This time, I was more prepared. I brought a flashlight and a small notebook to document anything I found. As I approached the library, the air grew colder, and the whispers began again, louder and more insistent. Inside, the library was even darker than before. The shadows seemed to move on their own, and the air was thick with an unexplainable tension. I made my way to the table where I had found the book. It was still there, open to the same page. I turned on my flashlight and began to search for more clues. Suddenly, I felt a presence behind me. I turned around, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, and saw the ghostly figure of the librarian. She was transparent, her eyes filled with sorrow and anger. "Why have you come?" she whispered, her voice echoing in the silence. I stood frozen, unable to speak, as she glided closer. The air grew colder, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me. But beneath the fear, there was a strange sense of connection, as if she was reaching out to me for help. Her sorrowful eyes seemed to pierce through me, searching for something. Gathering my courage, I spoke. "I want to help you," I said, my voice trembling. The ghostly librarian's expression softened, and she pointed towards the book. "The curse can only be lifted by uncovering the truth," she whispered, her voice a mere echo in the stillness. With a newfound resolve, I turned back to the book. The symbols on the pages began to make sense, revealing the librarian's tragic story. She had been framed for a theft she did not commit, and the real culprit had used dark magic to bind her spirit to the library. The only way to free her was to find and destroy the artifact that held her soul captive. The book mentioned a hidden passage within the library where the artifact was concealed. I searched the library, following the clues from the book. The whispers grew louder, guiding me towards a bookshelf in the far corner. As I examined the shelf, I noticed one book that seemed out of place. Pulling it, I heard a click, and the bookshelf swung open, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. With my flashlight in hand, I descended the stairs, each step echoing ominously. The hidden passage led to a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, lay a small, ornate box. The air was thick with the sense of malevolence, and I knew this was the artifact binding the librarian's spirit. As I approached the box, the whispers turned into anguished cries, urging me to destroy it. My hands shook as I lifted the box, feeling the dark energy pulsing from within. Suddenly, the ghostly figure of the librarian appeared beside me. "You must destroy it," she pleaded, her voice filled with desperation. I took a deep breath and raised the box above my head, ready to smash it against the stone floor. The room seemed to tremble, and the cries grew louder, almost deafening. With all my strength, I hurled the box to the ground. It shattered into pieces, and a blinding light filled the room. The cries ceased, replaced by a profound silence. The librarian's spirit began to dissolve, a look of peace on her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her form fading away. The air grew warm, and the oppressive feeling lifted. I felt a sense of relief wash over me, knowing I had set her free. As I climbed back up the stairs and out of the library, the first light of dawn was breaking, signaling a new beginning. The dawn's light washed over the camp, casting long shadows that felt far less menacing than the night before. I emerged from the library, feeling a strange sense of calm. The oppressive weight that had hung in the air was gone, replaced by a serene stillness. I knew the curse had been lifted, and the librarian's spirit was finally at peace. As I walked back to my cabin, I replayed the night's events in my mind. It felt surreal, like a dream, but the shattered remnants of the box in the hidden room were proof that it had all been real. My friends were waking up, and I realized I had been out all night. They looked at me curiously, sensing something had changed. I decided to tell them the truth, knowing they deserved to know the story behind the camp's most mysterious rule. Gathered in a circle, I recounted everything that had happened. Their expressions shifted from skepticism to awe as I described the ghostly librarian and the cursed artifact. Jake, who had been so fearful before, listened intently. "You really did it," he said quietly, a hint of admiration in his voice. "You freed her." With the curse lifted, the atmosphere at the camp changed. The library, once a place of fear and mystery, became a symbol of courage and discovery. The counselors removed the rule about entering at night, and we all spent time exploring its vast collection of books. It was no longer haunted but filled with the spirit of knowledge and adventure. One evening, as the sun set, I found myself back in the library. The place that had once terrified me now felt like a second home. I opened the book that had started it all, flipping through its pages. The symbols had faded, their magic spent. Yet, a sense of wonder remained. I had faced my fears, uncovered the truth, and in doing so, changed the camp forever. The summer passed quickly, filled with new friendships and adventures. On the last day, as we packed our bags to leave, I took one final walk through the library. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow on the rows of books. I knew I would never forget this place or the spirit I had helped set free. With a smile, I closed the door behind me, ready to carry the memories of that extraordinary summer into the future. The camp looked deserted as I arrived on November 14th, 2021. The chill in the air was sharper than I remembered from previous summers. The trees were bare, their skeletal branches casting eerie shadows across the grounds. I made my way to my cabin, passing the old library. Even in daylight, it exuded an unsettling aura. Whispers had circulated among the campers about strange occurrences and disappearances linked to the library. As night fell, the camp seemed to slip into a deeper silence. My curiosity about the library grew stronger. The rumors of nightly whispers and echoes were too intriguing to ignore. That night, after the signal bell rang, I slipped out of my cabin. The air was cold and crisp, my breath visible in the moonlight. I moved quietly, avoiding the crunch of leaves underfoot as much as possible. The library loomed ahead, its dark windows like empty eyes watching my approach. I hesitated at the door, listening for any sound. The night was still, but a faint echo seemed to emanate from within. Gathering my courage, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The library was dark, the only light coming from the moon, filtering through the dusty windows. As I ventured deeper into the library, I felt a strange pressure in the air, like a weight pressing down on me. I made my way to the back, where the whispers were said to be the loudest. Suddenly, I heard it. A soft, almost imperceptible whisper. I froze, straining to make out the words. They seemed to be calling a name, but I couldn't understand it. The sound sent chills down my spine, and I had to fight the urge to turn and run. I moved closer to the source of the whispering, feeling a mix of fear and curiosity. The whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to be coming from a small alcove lined with old, yellowed books. As I reached out to touch one of the books, the whispering stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. Just as I was about to turn away, a cold breeze swept through the library, and the door slammed shut behind me. The sudden slam of the door made my heart leap into my throat. I spun around, but the library was empty. The cold breeze persisted, carrying with it the faintest hint of something floral, almost like the scent of old perfume. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, determined to uncover the source of the whispers. I reached for the old book on the shelf. Its cover was worn and faded, the title barely legible. As I opened it, a cloud of dust rose, making me cough. The pages were filled with handwritten notes and clippings from old newspapers. Each note seemed to tell a fragment of a story, a puzzle waiting to be solved. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the text for any clues. One clipping caught my attention. It was an article about a camper who had disappeared in November 1953. The article mentioned strange noises coming from the library the night before the disappearance. My hands trembled as I read, the connection between the whispers and the disappearances becoming clearer. I needed to find more. I continued to read, the whispers growing louder, almost urgent. Suddenly, I heard a soft rustling behind me. I turned to see a faint figure, almost translucent, standing in the alcove shadows. The figure looked like a young girl, her eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. The girl didn't answer, but she raised her hand and pointed to a spot on the floor. I looked down and saw a trapdoor, hidden beneath a worn rug. With trembling hands, I moved the rug aside and pried open the trapdoor. A musty smell wafted up from the darkness below. I hesitated for a moment, then descended the narrow stairs, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The basement was cold and damp, the walls lined with shelves filled with old, forgotten books. The whispers were louder here, almost deafening. In the center of the room stood a small table with a single, flickering candle. On the table was an old journal, its pages yellowed with age. I opened it, and the first entry made my blood run cold. It was dated November 14th, 1953, and detailed the last known movements of the missing camper. The final entry ended abruptly, with a plea for help. I looked around, the feeling of being watched stronger than ever. The figure of the girl appeared again, her eyes filled with sorrow. The sorrowful gaze of the ghostly girl lingered in my mind as I stood in the cold, damp basement. The journal in my hands felt heavy with the weight of untold secrets. I read through the entries, each one painting a picture of a camper who had grown increasingly paranoid, haunted by the same whispers I was hearing now. The final entry ended with a desperate plea for help, the handwriting shaky and almost illegible. Determined to uncover the truth, I continued to explore the basement. In a corner, I found an old trunk, its hinges rusty and covered in dust. I forced it open and discovered more clippings, photos, and personal belongings of campers who had disappeared over the years. The evidence was overwhelming. There was a connection between the library and the vanishings. As I sifted through the contents, I found a photograph of the girl who had appeared to me. Her name was Emily, and she had disappeared in 1953. The realization that her spirit was still trapped here filled me with a deep sense of sorrow. I had to help her find peace. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, urging me to find the source of the curse that bound these spirits to the library. I returned to the journal, hoping for more clues. One entry mentioned a hidden room behind the bookshelves in the library. Gathering my courage, I ascended the stairs and returned to the alcove. The library was even darker now, the air thick with tension. I pushed against the bookshelf, feeling for any sign of a hidden mechanism. After what felt like an eternity, the shelf gave way, revealing a narrow passage. The passage led to a small, dimly lit room. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on it rested a black, ornate box. The whispers reached a crescendo, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. I knew this box held the key to breaking the curse. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached out to touch the box, the ghostly figure of Emily appeared beside me. She looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear. "You have to destroy it," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the din of the other whispers. I nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I lifted the box, feeling the dark energy pulsing from within. With all my strength, I smashed it against the stone floor. The box shattered, and a blinding light filled the room, silencing the whispers. Emily's figure began to fade, a look of peace replacing the fear in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice echoing in the silence. As she disappeared, the oppressive feeling in the library lifted, replaced by a serene calm. I knew I had done the right thing, freeing the spirits that had been trapped for so long. But as I left the hidden room and stepped back into the library, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to uncover. The library felt different as I stepped back into the main room. The air was lighter, the whispers gone, but a sense of unfinished business lingered. I examined the bookshelves, searching for any remaining clues. My eyes fell upon an old, dusty volume with no title. Pulling it from the shelf, I opened it to find more handwritten notes, much like those in the journal. The notes spoke of a hidden room where the real artifact was kept, suggesting that the box I destroyed was just a decoy. Determined to find this hidden room, I followed the cryptic directions in the book. They led me to a section of the library I hadn't explored yet. The air grew colder as I approached a large, ornate mirror. The notes hinted at the mirror being more than it seemed. I touched the surface, feeling a slight vibration. Pushing harder, the mirror swung open, revealing a dark passageway. The atmosphere inside was thick with an almost tangible darkness, pressing down on me as I entered. The passageway led to a room much larger than the previous one. In the center stood a pedestal similar to the first, but this one had an ancient book bound in black leather. The book emanated a sinister energy, making the hairs on my neck stand up. I approached cautiously, the air around me growing colder with each step. As I reached out to touch the book, a shadowy figure appeared, blocking my path. It wasn't Emily. This figure was taller and exuded a palpable malevolence. The figure spoke in a deep, resonant voice, warning me to leave. "You have freed some, but the true power remains," it intoned, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. I stood my ground, determined to break the curse once and for all. Gathering my courage, I stepped forward, trying to reach the book. The figure moved to block me again, but I pushed past, my fingers grazing the ancient leather cover. The figure let out a terrifying roar, the room shaking with its fury. Ignoring the fear clawing at my insides, I opened the book. The pages were filled with dark incantations and symbols that seemed to pulse with life. I tore out the pages, one by one, the room shaking more violently with each tear. The shadowy figure screamed, its form disintegrating into nothingness. As the last page was destroyed, a wave of energy surged through the room, dispelling the darkness. The oppressive feeling lifted, and I knew the curse was finally broken. With the curse finally broken, the oppressive atmosphere of the library lifted, replaced by a serene stillness. The once dark room was now bathed in a soft, warm light. I took a moment to catch my breath, my heart still racing from the confrontation with the shadowy figure. As I looked around, I saw the remnants of the torn pages scattered across the floor, their dark energy dissipated. The room felt peaceful, almost welcoming. I made my way back through the passageway and into the main library. The change was palpable. The cold, dark corners were now illuminated, and the sense of dread that had permeated the air was gone. I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction, knowing that I had freed the spirits trapped within these walls. I returned to the alcove where I had first encountered Emily. Her ghostly figure appeared one last time, her face now serene and grateful. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice carrying a warmth that had been absent before. "You have given us peace." With those words, she faded away, her spirit finally at rest. I stood there for a moment, taking in the silence. The whispers were gone, and the library was just a library once more. As I left the building, the first rays of dawn were breaking over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the camp. The other campers were waking up, unaware of the events that had transpired during the night. I decided to keep the details to myself, knowing that the true story might be too unbelievable for most. Instead, I shared a simplified version, explaining that I had discovered and dispelled an old curse. The camp director, Mr. Thompson, was surprisingly understanding, perhaps sensing the truth behind my words. As the days went by, the atmosphere at the camp changed. The library became a place of curiosity rather than fear, and the campers felt drawn to its now peaceful halls. I spent my remaining time at camp enjoying the newfound tranquility, forging deeper connections with my friends. The experience had changed me, instilling a sense of courage and resilience that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Arriving at the camp on January 7th, 2024, the air was crisp and filled with the sounds of nature. The campgrounds were deserted in the off-season, making it the perfect time for our group to explore without interruption. The campfire crackled as we settled in, exchanging stories and laughs. The main attraction, however, was the old library, known for its eerie reputation. Warnings from the camp staff about not entering the library after dark only fueled our curiosity. That night, as the signal bell rang, I decided to investigate the library on my own. The others were hesitant, preferring the safety of the campfire. I moved quietly, the cold air biting at my skin. The library loomed ahead, its windows dark and foreboding. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, the air instantly colder and heavier. The room was dark, my flashlight casting long shadows across the walls. I wandered through the aisles of dusty books, the silence oppressive. In a far corner, I found an old, leather-bound book that seemed out of place. Its cover was worn, and the pages were filled with strange symbols and illustrations of a time long past. As I flipped through the pages, a chill ran down my spine. The book detailed the history of the camp and spoke of a hidden room beneath the library, rumored to hold dark secrets. Determined to uncover these secrets, I began searching for any sign of an entrance to the hidden room. The book mentioned a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug near the back of the library. I found the rug, and with some effort, managed to lift it, revealing a wooden trapdoor. My heart raced as I opened it and descended into the darkness below. The air grew colder with each step, the sense of unease growing stronger. The basement was dimly lit by a single flickering light bulb. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old books and forgotten artifacts. In the center of the room was a pedestal, much like the one in the previous stories. On it lay a small, ancient-looking book bound in dark leather. As I approached, I felt a presence behind me. Turning slowly, I saw a ghostly figure of a past camper, his eyes filled with sorrow and fear. The ghostly figure stood silently, his eyes pleading. My heart pounded as I faced him, trying to muster the courage to speak. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The figure pointed to the book on the pedestal. I approached it cautiously, feeling the cold emanating from its pages. Opening the book, I found a diary of sorts, chronicling the experiences of past campers who had ventured into the library's basement. The entries were filled with tales of fear and despair, each camper describing strange occurrences and a growing sense of dread. The last entry was dated January 7th, 1954, exactly 70 years ago. It spoke of a dark secret buried beneath the camp, a secret that had cursed anyone who discovered it. The writer described seeing ghostly figures and hearing whispers in the night, much like I was experiencing now. As I read, the ghostly camper moved closer, his presence almost tangible. "We were trapped," he whispered, his voice echoing in the cold room. "We tried to uncover the secret, but it consumed us." His words sent chills down my spine, and I realized that the curse was still active, Determined to break it, I continued to read, hoping to find a way to free the trapped spirits. The final pages of the book mentioned an artifact hidden deeper within the basement, said to hold the key to breaking the curse. I searched the room, moving old books and artifacts aside until I found a small hidden door behind one of the shelves. Pushing it open, I revealed a narrow tunnel leading further into the darkness. The air grew colder as I ventured deeper, the walls closing in around me. The tunnel opened into a small chamber, where a pedestal stood in the center, holding a small, ornate box. The box pulsed with a dark energy, and I knew this was the source of the curse. With trembling hands, I reached for the box. The moment I touched it, the room seemed to vibrate with a low, ominous hum. The ghostly figure appeared beside me, his eyes wide with hope. "You must destroy it," he urged, his voice filled with desperation. Gathering all my strength, I lifted the box and hurled it to the ground. It shattered with a deafening crash, and a blinding light filled the chamber. The light faded, and the oppressive feeling in the air lifted. The ghostly figure smiled, his form dissolving into the light. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice fading. The chamber was now silent, the curse broken. I made my way back through the tunnel and up into the library, feeling a sense of relief and accomplishment. The library felt different now, free of its dark past. The dawn light filtered through the library windows as I emerged from the basement, feeling the weight of the curse lifted. The oppressive cold was gone, replaced by a welcoming warmth. I carefully closed the trapdoor and replaced the rug, hoping to leave no trace of the dark secrets I had uncovered. As I exited the library, the camp was beginning to stir. My friends were waking up, unaware of the events that had transpired during the night. I decided to keep the details to myself, not wanting to alarm them. Instead, I shared a simplified version, explaining that I had discovered an old artifact and managed to dispel its dark energy. The camp director, Mr. Thompson, listened intently and seemed relieved. He nodded, perhaps understanding more than he let on. "You've done us a great service," he said quietly. "The camp will be safer now." In the days that followed, the atmosphere at the camp lightened. The library, once a place of fear and mystery, became a source of fascination. The other campers were drawn to its now peaceful halls, exploring the shelves without fear. I spent the remaining time at camp, enjoying the newfound tranquility and strengthening my bonds with friends. The experience had changed me, instilling a sense of bravery and resilience. As I packed my bags to leave, I took one last walk through the library. The sun cast a golden glow on the rows of books, and I knew I would never forget what had happened here. With a final look, I closed the library door behind me, ready to carry the memories of this extraordinary experience into the future.